I still remember the way Melissa's hand shot across the elevator doors. Not toward me exactly, just enough to make it clear that if I took another step, she intended to stop me. My daughter Emily was standing beside me with a chocolate birthday cake balanced carefully in both hands. Mrs. Carter, Melissa said, lowering her voice, "You can't go upstairs." I looked at the elevator, then at her. "Why not?" she swallowed. "Mr. Carter has a private guest inside." Emily frowned. "But it's his birthday." Melissa glanced at my daughter, then back at me. "I understand, but there are no exceptions." That was the moment something inside me went very still. My name is Rebecca Carter. I was 40 years old, married to Daniel for nearly 20 years. And until that afternoon, I had never imagined being treated like a stranger at the company I had helped build. It was a Tuesday in early October, just after 2 in the afternoon, the kind of cool Chicago day where you needed a jacket outside but still felt comfortable once you got indoors. Emily and I had driven from our home in Naperville that morning after she finished a school appointment. We had stopped at a bakery in Oak Brook and picked up Daniel's favorite chocolate cake. Nothing fancy. Chocolate frosting, white lettering, a few little chocolate curls around the edge. "Happy 45th, Daniel." Emily had laughed when she saw it. "Dad's going to complain about turning 45. He complained about turning 40, I reminded her. He complains about everything." We both laughed. That was before we walked through those glass doors. Carter Industrial Supply occupied 3 floors of an older office building downtown. Daniel had leased the space years earlier after the company had outgrown its first warehouse. The reception area had polished stone floors, gray couches, and a huge framed photograph of the Chicago skyline behind the front desk. I had seen that photograph hundreds of times. I had helped choose it. But that afternoon, Melissa stood between me and the elevator as if I were someone who had wandered in from the street. I forced a smile. "We're here to surprise him." "I know." The answer came too quickly. I noticed it. "You know," Melissa's face tightened. "I mean, I know you're his wife." Emily shifted the cake in her hands. "Can we just go up? We won't stay long." Melissa looked at her, and for a second I saw something in her expression that bothered me. Pity, not annoyance. Not embarrassment. Pity. That was when I knew there was more to this. "Who is upstairs?" I asked. Melissa shook her head. "I can't discuss Mr. Carter's meetings. It's his birthday." "I understand. Then why are you acting like I'm asking to walk into a classified government meeting?" Her lips parted, but no answer came. Emily looked at me. "Mom," I reached over and gently took the cake from her. "Go stand over there for a second, honey." She moved toward the chairs. I leaned closer to Melissa. "Is there another woman upstairs?" Her face went white. That was enough. I didn't need a confession. I didn't need a dramatic scene. I had just watched the truth cross a woman's face before she could hide it. I walked over to Emily and crouched beside her. "Sweetheart, cover your ears for me." She looked confused. "Why just trust me?" She put her hands over her ears. I took out my phone. My brother Tom answered on the second ring. "Hey, Beck. What's up, Tom? I need you to do something for me." The way I said it must have changed his tone immediately. "What happened? I'm at Daniel's office." A pause. With Emily, another pause. "And I need you to freeze every dollar we have tied up in that company, right now." Tom didn't speak for several seconds. "Rebecca, what are you talking about? His receptionist won't let us upstairs. Why, Daniel has a private guest." Tom exhaled slowly. "Are you sure you want to do this before you know what's going on?" I looked at Melissa. She was staring at the floor. "Yes." "Okay," he said. "I'm going to make some calls. But don't do anything else until I get back to you." "Fine." I hung up. Emily lowered her hands. "Is Dad okay?" I looked at my 17-year-old daughter. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to tell her that her father might be cheating on me, that the woman at the front desk knew something, that my brother was calling banks because I suddenly didn't trust the man I had shared half my life with. Instead, I said, "I don't know yet." We left the building. The cake sat untouched on the passenger seat. Emily didn't say much on the drive home, neither did I. At a red light near Oak Brook, my phone rang. "Tom," I answered, "Tell me." His voice was quieter than before. "Rebecca, don't go home yet." Why, I checked the company records. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. And I found something. What several transfers over the last 6 months. Money going out of the company into another business. What business? North Star Advisory LLC. I waited. Then Tom said something that made my stomach drop. "I don't think Daniel was preparing for a business meeting today." I glanced at the birthday cake beside me. Then what was he preparing for? Tom didn't answer immediately. Finally he said, "I think he was preparing for you to find out." I didn't go straight home. Instead, I pulled into the parking lot of a Panera Bread in Naperville and sat there with the engine running. The cake was still beside me, that ridiculous little birthday cake. For almost 20 years I had known Daniel's habits. I knew he liked his coffee black in the morning. I knew he hated cilantro. I knew he checked the weather before leaving the house even when he wasn't going anywhere. And I knew that when Daniel was nervous, he rubbed the back of his neck with his right hand. Now I was wondering how much of what I knew had ever been true. Emily sat quietly in the passenger seat. "Mom, yeah, are you going to tell me what's happening?" I stared through the windshield. "I don't have all the answers yet. Is Dad cheating on you?" The question landed harder because she said it so calmly. I turned toward her. "Why would you ask that because of the receptionist?" I didn't answer. Emily looked down at her phone. "I'm not stupid, Mom. I know you're not. And I saw Dad with that woman before." My stomach tightened. "What woman?" She hesitated. "I don't know her name." "When, maybe 2 months ago?" I waited. Emily took a breath. "Dad told me he was having dinner with a client. I was downtown with my friend Claire. We went into that restaurant near Michigan Avenue." "What restaurant? The Italian one with the red awnings. I think it's called Rosebud." I knew the place. "Daniel had taken me there for our anniversary years ago." Emily continued. "I saw him sitting with a woman. They weren't talking about business. How do you know they were holding hands?" For a moment I couldn't speak. Emily looked embarrassed. "I didn't tell you because I thought maybe I was wrong." "You weren't." She looked at me. "How do you know I swallowed?" "I don't. Not completely. But I did. Not because of one photograph or one overheard conversation, because suddenly every strange little moment from the past year was lining up. The late meetings. The phone turned face down, the password changed on his laptop. The weekends when he said he needed to check inventory. The new cologne he started wearing to work. I had noticed all of it. I had simply talked myself out of believing what it meant. Tom arrived about 20 minutes later. He slid into the booth across from us and placed a manila folder on the table. "Okay," he said. "Before we do anything else, I need you to understand something. Don't confront Daniel yet." I almost laughed. "Tom, I already called you and told you to freeze our money." That was the right move. "Then why shouldn't I confront him? Because right now we have suspicions. I want documents." He opened the folder. The first page showed a transfer from Carter Industrial Supply to North Star Advisory LLC. $18,500. The next one was for $11,200. Then $7,800. I stared at the numbers. "What is this company?" "Technically, it's a consulting company." "Technically," Tom gave me a tired look. "That means someone filed paperwork and paid the state fees." I almost smiled. It was the first time I'd felt anything close to normal all afternoon. "Who owns it?" "A woman named Laura Bennett." My fingers went cold. "That's her." Tom looked at me. "You're sure I don't know her personally?" "But I saw her picture on Daniel's phone once. When, about 3 months ago. I remembered that night clearly. Daniel had been sitting at the kitchen island scrolling through his phone. When I walked behind him, he immediately locked the screen. I had teased him. "What's so secret work?" One word. I believed him. Tom turned another page. "There's more." He showed me several hotel charges. Milwaukee, Indianapolis, Chicago. Different hotels, different weekends, but all paid with company funds. I felt my face getting warm. Those were business trips. Were they? I thought they were. Tom didn't answer. He didn't have to. I picked up my phone and opened the shared credit card account. There they were. Dates, restaurants, hotel rooms. A charge from a hotel in downtown Chicago on a Saturday night when Daniel had told me he was visiting a supplier in Milwaukee. I remembered that weekend. Emily had been 16. I had spent Saturday afternoon watching her play volleyball while Daniel texted me that he was exhausted and would probably sleep early. I had even felt sorry for him. Now I stared at the screen. "Rebecca," Tom said softly. I shook my head. "Don't. What don't? Tell me I'm strong." I wasn't going to. Good. I closed my eyes. For almost 20 years, I had built my life around one man. When we started Carter Industrial Supply, Daniel had one small warehouse and a second-hand delivery truck. I was 21 and working part-time at a dental office. The company struggled. There were months when we weren't sure if we'd make payroll. I remember sitting at our kitchen table at 11 at night sorting invoices while Daniel slept upstairs. I remember writing an $18,000 check from my savings account when a supplier threatened to stop delivering. Daniel had promised he'd pay me back. He did, eventually. But the company had survived because we both sacrificed for it. And now I was learning he had been telling people he built it alone. Tom looked at me. "You need to see one more thing." He pulled out another document. It was a draft corporate agreement. I read it once. Then again. My name appeared nowhere near the ownership section. What is this proposed restructuring? Why? Tom leaned forward. Because if Daniel had gotten this signed, several valuable assets would have been moved into another entity. I looked at him. And my share, Tom, didn't soften it. You would have had very little control. I sat back. For the first time I understood what that receptionist had really meant. Private guest, no exceptions. It wasn't just an affair. Something bigger had been happening behind that door. Daniel wasn't simply hiding another woman. He was preparing a life that didn't include me. I looked at Tom. How long has he been planning this? We don't know yet. My eyes filled, but I refused to cry in the middle of Panera. Instead, I laughed quietly. Tom frowned. What? I shook my head. Daniel always said he could spot a dishonest person from a mile away. Tom waited. I wiped my cheek. Apparently the mile was measured in the opposite direction. He smiled despite himself. Then his expression became serious again. "Rebecca, we need to be careful. I know, you're angry. I am. You're hurt. I am. And you're going to want to make him pay." I looked through the window at cars moving slowly along the road. "I don't want to destroy the company." Tom nodded. "Good. But I won't let him destroy me either." My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "Sorry about today, got caught up in a complicated meeting. Let's talk tonight." I stared at it for several seconds. Then I typed, "Happy birthday, Daniel. We can talk when you're ready to tell me the truth." I hit send. 3 dots appeared almost immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. I put the phone face down. Emily looked at me. "What did Dad say?" I reached across the table and took her hand. "He wants to talk." "Are you going to?" "Yes. But not today." I looked at Tom. "No," I said. "Not until I know what I'm walking into." And for the first time that day, I wasn't waiting for Daniel to decide what happened next. I was preparing to decide it myself. The next morning, I woke up at 4:47 a.m. I knew the exact time because I had been staring at the red numbers on the alarm clock for nearly 20 minutes. Daniel was no longer sleeping beside me. That should have felt strange. Instead, it felt like confirmation. He had come home sometime after midnight. I heard the garage door around 12:18, followed by the quiet opening and closing of the front door. I stayed in bed. He didn't come upstairs. At 12:41, I heard the refrigerator open. At 12:46, the kitchen faucet ran. Then silence. I didn't sleep after that. By 7, I was downstairs making coffee. Daniel walked into the kitchen wearing the same navy suit from the day before. He looked exhausted. "Morning," he said. I poured coffee into my mug. "Morning." He stood there for a moment. "You've been avoiding me. I've been thinking. About yesterday I looked at him. Among other things." He pulled out a chair. "Rebecca, I can explain. That sentence told me more than he realized. I sat across from him. Then explain. He rubbed the back of his neck. There it was. That old nervous habit. I had a business meeting. With a private guest, he looked away. Laura is a consultant. I didn't react. How long have you known her? About a year. And how long has North Star Advisory been receiving money from my company? His face changed. Just slightly, but I saw it. What, you heard me? Who told you that I smiled without humor? That's your first question, Daniel stood. This is exactly why I didn't want you involved in the business. I stared at him. You didn't want me involved. You don't understand how complicated things have become. I understood when we were broke. He said nothing. I understood when we couldn't make payroll. I understood when I emptied my savings account to keep your suppliers from walking away. That was 20 years ago. Exactly. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something I don't think he intended to say. You don't know what happens inside the company anymore. I felt something crack inside me. Not loudly. Just enough. Maybe I don't, I said. But apparently I know more than you thought. He grabbed his keys. We're not doing this right now. Fine. He stopped at the doorway. I love you, Rebecca. I almost believed him. That was the worst part. I wanted to. For one brief second, I wanted to walk over, put my arms around him, and hear him tell me that everything was a misunderstanding. Then I remembered Melissa's face. I remembered the hotel charges. I remembered the document with my name missing. Then tell me the truth, I said. He looked at me. I already did. Then he walked out. I didn't cry. I stood there until I heard his car disappear down the street. Then I called Tom. It's worse than we thought, I figured. He says Laura is a consultant. Of course he does. Tom, what exactly did you find? I need you to come downtown. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a conference room with Tom and an attorney named Susan Miller. Susan was in her early 50s, wore square black glasses, and had the calm manner of someone who had spent years listening to people explain how their lives had suddenly fallen apart. She didn't dramatize anything. I appreciated that. She spread several documents across the table. First, she said, I want to be clear about something. Do not empty company accounts. Do not transfer money to yourself. Do not destroy anything, and do not threaten anyone. I nodded. I don't want to do any of that. Good. She pointed to the documents. We're going to preserve evidence and protect your legal interests. That's different from revenge. I looked at Tom. He gave me a small nod. Susan continued. The corporate restructuring Daniel was preparing is concerning, but we need to establish whether he had authority to do what he was attempting to do. What if he did? Then we deal with it legally. What if he didn't? Then we make sure it doesn't happen. I sat back. It wasn't the dramatic answer I wanted, but it was the answer I needed. For the next 2 hours, we went through financial records. Then Daniel called. My phone buzzed across the table. I stared at his name. Susan looked at me. You don't have to answer. I almost ignored it. Then I picked up. Hello, where are you out? With Tom, I didn't answer. He sighed. Rebecca, this is getting ridiculous. What's ridiculous, you freezing company funds? I didn't freeze anything personally. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Then maybe you should talk to the bank. Silence. Then his voice sharpened. You're trying to destroy the company. No. You're making business impossible. Then maybe the business shouldn't have been built on secrets. He hung up. I stared at the phone. Tom leaned back. That went well. I gave him a look. He raised both hands. Sorry. Despite everything, I laughed. It lasted about 3 seconds. Then my phone buzzed again. This time it was an email notification. From Daniel. The subject line said, "We need to talk before this gets worse." I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I looked at Susan. What happens now? We wait. I hated those words. But we waited. By 4 that afternoon, the bank confirmed that the requested safeguards were in place. Nothing had been taken from Daniel, nothing had been stolen. The financial moves simply couldn't proceed without proper authorization. Daniel apparently didn't understand that distinction. At 4:32, he called again. I answered. What do you realize what you've done? I've protected myself. You're humiliating me. You did that yourself. He was quiet. Then he said, Laura means nothing. I closed my eyes. I never asked about her. Another silence. Then what are you asking about everything? He hung up. That evening, Emily was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework when she suddenly looked up. Mom, yeah, can I tell you something? Of course. She closed her laptop. I found something. She pulled an old family laptop from her backpack. Dad used this computer a few months ago. She opened an email account. I don't know why, but some of his messages were still synced. My heart started beating faster. Emily, you shouldn't be going through his emails. I know. She looked guilty. I wasn't looking for anything. I was trying to print something for school. Then she clicked on an email. The sender was Daniel. The recipient was Laura Bennett. The date was 6 months earlier. I read the first line. We need to move the assets before Rebecca starts asking questions. I stopped breathing. Emily looked at me. Mom, I kept reading. There were references to North Star Advisory. There were discussions about transferring equipment leases and certain accounts. Then I saw a sentence that made my hands shake. Once she signs, she won't have enough ownership to interfere. I leaned back in my chair. Emily's eyes filled with tears. He was going to take it from you. I didn't answer, because suddenly I understood. The woman upstairs, the secret payments, the restructuring, the lies, they weren't separate things, they were pieces of the same plan. I got up and walked into the bathroom. I closed the door. Then I sat on the edge of the tub and finally let myself cry. Not because I had lost Daniel, not yet. I cried because I realized how long he had been planning for a future in which I was no longer his partner. A few minutes later there was a knock. Mom. I wiped my face. I'm okay. No, you're not. I opened the door. Emily hugged me. I held her tightly. I should have protected you from this, I whispered. She shook her head. You didn't do anything wrong. That sentence broke me more than anything Daniel had said. Later that night, Tom came over. I showed him the email. He read it twice. Then he looked at me. Rebecca, you can't confront him alone. I know. What are you thinking? I looked at the kitchen table. At the old laptop. At the evidence that had changed everything. I don't want to fight with him in our kitchen. Tom nodded. Then where I looked up. Somewhere he can't rewrite what happened. I didn't sleep much that night. At 3 a.m, I was still sitting at the kitchen table with Daniel's email open on the old laptop. I kept reading the same sentence. Once she signs, she won't have enough ownership to interfere. Interfere. That word bothered me more than anything else. I wasn't his wife in that sentence. I wasn't Emily's mother. I wasn't the woman who had helped him build a company from a rented warehouse. I was an obstacle, something to be managed, something to move around. By 8 the next morning, Susan had reviewed the email and told me exactly what she wanted. Do not forward it to anyone except me. Why? Because we need to preserve the original. I nodded. This is evidence. It could be, but don't assume one email proves everything. We still need the financial records and corporate documents. I understood. That was the frustrating part. There would be no dramatic button I could push that magically fixed my life. There would be paperwork, phone calls, lawyers, bank statements, waiting, and a lot of nights when I would wonder whether I was making the right decision. Around 11, Daniel called. I watched his name light up my screen. I almost ignored him. Instead, I answered, Hello, we need to talk. We do. Not over the phone. Agreed. Come to the office. I almost laughed. The same office where your receptionist wouldn't let me upstairs. He was silent. Rebecca, that wasn't my decision. I stared out the kitchen window. Then whose decision was it? I was in a meeting? With Laura. Another silence. Yes. He finally said it. Just one word. Yes. I closed my eyes. At least now he was no longer pretending. What was the meeting about? Business. Daniel. I swear to you that's what it was. I didn't answer. He continued. Laura is involved in a consulting project. Then why did you tell Melissa to keep me away? I didn't. I remembered Melissa's face. Someone was lying, maybe both of them. I'll meet you tonight, I said. Where your birthday dinner? He hesitated. You're coming? Yes. I thought you weren't speaking to me. I never said that. Rebecca, I'll see you there. I hung up. Tom called 10 minutes later. What did he want an office meeting? Absolutely not, I said no. Good, I told him I'd see him at the birthday dinner. Tom was quiet. You're sure? No. That was the honest answer. I wasn't sure about anything. I wasn't sure I wanted to expose him. I wasn't sure I wanted everyone to know my marriage was falling apart. I wasn't even sure I wanted to stay in the same room with him. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let him control the story. The birthday dinner was scheduled for Saturday evening at a private dining room in a restaurant near the Chicago River. Daniel had invited company executives, a few longtime clients, and several friends. Apparently, he still intended to celebrate. That afternoon, I drove to the restaurant with Tom. Susan met us there beforehand. Remember, she said you don't have to say everything. I know. You don't have to answer every accusation. I know. And if he tries to provoke you, I know. Tom smiled. You've been practicing. I gave him a look. He shrugged. I'm trying to keep you from getting arrested for murder. I laughed. It was the first genuine laugh I'd had in days. Very helpful. We entered the restaurant at 6:48 p.m. The private room was already full. Daniel stood near the bar talking to two executives. He saw me. His face changed immediately. For 1 second, he looked relieved. Then he saw Tom, then Susan. The relief disappeared. He walked toward us. What is this? I kept my voice calm. My family. This isn't the place for this. You're right. I looked around the room. It's your birthday dinner. He lowered his voice. Can we talk privately? No, Rebecca. You wanted private meetings before. His jaw tightened. Not here. I looked at him. You had a private guest at your office when our daughter and I came to wish you happy birthday. He glanced around. Several people had started listening. Daniel stepped closer. Keep your voice down. I am. Then Laura walked into the room. She stopped when she saw me. Neither of us spoke. Daniel turned toward her. Laura, go home. She looked at him. I thought you said everything was handled. The room went quiet. Daniel's face drained of color. Laura looked at me, then at Tom, then at Susan. Oh, that one word said enough. Daniel grabbed her arm. Not here. She pulled away. You told me she knew. I stared at Daniel. What did you tell her he didn't answer? Laura looked confused. You said Rebecca agreed to the restructuring. My heart dropped. I looked at Susan. She was already writing something down. Daniel stepped toward Laura. Stop talking. Laura's eyes narrowed. You said she was going to sign. I finally understood. He had been telling Laura a completely different story. He had apparently told her that I knew about the restructuring, that I was cooperating, that I would eventually sign. Maybe he had even told her our marriage was already over. I looked at him. Were you ever planning to tell me he said nothing? Tom stepped forward. Daniel, we have the records. Daniel looked at him. What records? The transfers. North Star Advisory. The proposed asset restructuring. Daniel's face hardened. You had no right. Tom laughed once. Actually, I did. Daniel turned to me. You froze the accounts. I protected our interests. You're destroying everything I built. I looked at him. Everything you built. Before I could say anything else, a voice came from behind us. That's not true. Everyone turned. It was Frank Miller, one of the company's oldest employees. Frank was 68 and had worked for Daniel since the warehouse days. He looked at Daniel. I was there. Daniel stared at him. Frank continued. Your wife was there too. Nobody moved. She handled payroll when we couldn't afford an office manager. She called suppliers when you were out drinking with clients. She used her own money when we were short. Daniel shook his head. Frank, this isn't your business. Frank looked at him. Actually, it is. You made it my business when you told everyone you built that company alone. Daniel looked around the room. For the first time, I saw something I'd never seen in him before. He looked small, not weak, just exposed. Then Melissa appeared at the doorway. She had apparently been invited to the dinner. She looked terrified. Daniel saw her. "Melissa, don't." She stopped. I didn't say anything. Neither did Tom. Melissa took a breath. "I should have told you." Daniel's face tightened. "Go home." "No." She looked at me. "I should have told you what he asked me to do." The room became completely silent. She continued. "He told me not to let you upstairs that afternoon." I stared at her. Why? Melissa swallowed. "Because Laura was inside." Daniel closed his eyes. Melissa continued. "He said you couldn't know what was happening yet." That was the moment I stopped feeling confused. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't being jealous. I wasn't overreacting. I had simply walked into the middle of a plan that had been underway for months. I looked at Daniel. "I came to your office with our daughter carrying a birthday cake." He looked at me. "You wouldn't even let us through the door." I paused. 5 minutes later, I made one phone call. Nobody spoke. I continued quietly. "That was the first time you realized you couldn't control everything." Daniel's eyes dropped, and for once he had nothing to say. The birthday dinner ended without anyone touching the cake. I don't know if that was because nobody was hungry anymore, or because the whole room had forgotten why we were there. Daniel stood near the window for several minutes after Melissa finished speaking. The Chicago River was dark behind him, reflecting the lights from the buildings. He looked out at it as if the answer to everything might be somewhere across the water. Then he turned to me. "Rebecca, can we please go somewhere private?" I shook my head. "No." His shoulders dropped. "I know how this looks." I almost smiled. "No, Daniel. You know how it feels to be caught." He flinched. I wasn't proud of saying it, but I wasn't taking it back either. Tom stepped beside me. "Let's leave." I nodded. As we walked toward the door, Daniel called my name. I stopped. "I never meant to hurt you." I turned around. "Then what did you mean to do?" He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. That was answer enough. The next few weeks were not dramatic. They were exhausting. That's something nobody tells you about betrayal. The big confrontation lasts maybe 10 minutes. The rest is paperwork. Susan's office became a place I knew far too well. There were documents to review, phone calls with accountants, meetings about the company, and endless questions about transactions I had never even known existed. Every time I thought we had found the worst thing, another small detail appeared. A payment, a contract, an email, a hotel receipt. Daniel had not only been dishonest with me, he had been careless. And carelessness leaves a trail. Still, nothing happened overnight. The bank didn't simply hand me a check. The company didn't magically become mine. I had legal bills. I had to protect myself without putting the employees at Carter Industrial Supply in danger. And some of those employees were angry with me. One afternoon, Frank called. "I want to talk." I met him at a coffee shop in Naperville. He looked tired. "I heard some people are blaming you." "They are. They think you're trying to take the company away from Daniel." "I don't want to take anything that isn't mine." Frank nodded. I figured. He stirred his coffee. "But they're scared." "So am I." He looked at me. "You know what I remember? What, the old warehouse?" I smiled faintly. That place smelled terrible. Frank laughed. "It did. Daniel said it was temporary. It was temporary for 6 years. We both laughed. Then Frank became serious. "You were there, Rebecca." "I know. No, I mean you were really there. People forget." I looked down at my coffee. I forgot too. Frank reached across the table. "Don't." That one word stayed with me. A week later, Daniel moved into an apartment in the city. He sent me a message asking whether I wanted him to take the old family photographs. I stared at the phone for a long time. Finally, I replied, "Take whatever is yours." He wrote back, "Everything in that house feels like ours." I almost responded. Instead, I put the phone away. Because that was the problem. It had been ours. But he had spent months planning how to divide it without me. Emily struggled more than she let on. One evening, she sat beside me on the couch. "Mom, yeah, are you going to divorce Dad?" I didn't answer immediately. "I don't know." She nodded. "Would that make you happier?" I looked at her. I don't know if happier is the right word. What word is I thought about it? Peaceful. She leaned against my shoulder. "I want that for you." I kissed the top of her head. "I want it for you too." A few days later, Melissa came to the house. She looked nervous standing on the porch. I wanted to apologize. I invited her inside. She sat at the kitchen table exactly where I had once sorted invoices for Daniel's company. "I was doing my job," she said. "I know. But I should have handled that day differently." "You were scared." She looked surprised. "How did you know?" "Because I saw your face." She lowered her eyes. "I thought if I didn't do what Daniel told me, I'd lose my job." I nodded. "I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me." "I already have." She looked up. "But," I continued, "I'm still allowed to remember what happened." She nodded slowly. "I understand." Before she left, she stopped at the door. "I hope you know something." "What?" "You weren't crazy." I felt my throat tighten. "Thank you." After she left, I stood in the hallway for several minutes. That sentence meant more to me than she could have known, because for months Daniel had made me question myself. Was I imagining things? Was I being too suspicious? Was I making problems where there weren't any? No. I had simply been listening to my instincts and ignoring them because I loved him. The legal process continued. Eventually, the records established that Daniel had attempted to move company assets without properly securing my consent. The restructuring was stopped. The financial accounts were corrected. My ownership interest was protected. North Star Advisory was dissolved. Laura disappeared from the company completely. Daniel and I began the formal process of ending our marriage. There was no dramatic courtroom scene, no judge pounding a gavel, no huge check arriving in the mail, just two people sitting across from lawyers dividing 20 years of a life, and honestly that was harder. One afternoon I went into the garage and found the birthday cake box still sitting in the freezer. I had forgotten about it. I opened the box. The frosting had cracked. The words were still visible. "Happy 45th, Daniel." I stood there staring at it. Then I laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because suddenly I understood how strange that day had been. I had driven into Chicago thinking I was going to surprise my husband. Instead, I discovered a secret life. I took the cake out of the freezer and threw it in the trash. Emily watched from the doorway. Really, what if Dad wanted it? I looked at her. He had his chance. She smiled. "So, what are we doing this weekend?" I thought for a moment. "Lake Michigan." Seriously? You hate planning trips." "I know." She grabbed her phone. "Then I'm choosing the hotel." I laughed. "Absolutely not." She ran upstairs. For the first time in months, our house felt light. Not happy exactly, not yet, but lighter. I didn't destroy Daniel's company. I didn't take everything he owned. I didn't need to. I simply made sure he could no longer decide what my life was worth. Looking back, I think that's what revenge really meant to me. It wasn't about hurting him. It was about finally refusing to hurt myself just to keep a marriage alive. If you've ever been underestimated by someone you trusted, I hope you remember that protecting yourself doesn't make you cruel. Sometimes the quietest decision you make is the one that changes everything. And if you want to hear another story about someone who finally stood up for herself, stay with me. I didn't destroy Daniel's life. I simply stopped letting him decide what mine was worth.